The police contacted me to go for a voluntary interview, in which if I didn't attend, I could be arrested. So it's very voluntary. About 6 tweets. I got defamed by left-wing feminists. They say that the dictionary definition of the word woman is exclusionary and is probably causes the mass genocide of men in dresses. Well, there's sex and gender. Like, no, there isn't.
I don't want in my life to have that many penises in my face.
Trans rights, as far as I'm concerned, is just a euphemism for demands. Completely irrational, unreasonable demands. I absolutely don't think any time ever it is appropriate to give a child puberty blockers at all. I go in the toilet and I'm in there and then a man comes in, I just do this. That is a threat, and you'd be damned stupid to ignore it.
Does it make a difference to you at all if they've had their willy snipped off?
No, not at all, no. Humiliation and shame can sometimes be part of the sort of the fetish. I mean, I have utter contempt for these men.
Do you believe that most or all trans people, when whatever, are attracted to it as a fetish? Take me back to when this all started for you, when you started talking about gender critical issues.
Okay, so let me just say, first of all, I don't call them gender critical.
Damn.
I just say they're women's issues. No, that's absolutely fine. I think it's worth having that conversation where I make it clear. So in 2015, Tories got elected. I joined this group called Awesome Lefty Women. On Facebook, it started with like 400 members when I joined. It went up to 20,000. These were all women that could not possibly believe that the country had elected an outright Tory government. And it was just all these women, you didn't know if they were lesbian, you didn't know if they were mothers, you didn't know if they were married, you didn't really know anything about them aside from the issue, their political issues. And then AGPs started coming in. So men who looked like 50, 60-year-old men in bad makeup, bad wigs. And what they did is they brought sort of loads of photographs of themselves, so sort of soft focus secretary 1980 shoots kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And all the women did this weird thing where they would compliment them relentlessly and say, oh, I wish I had your legs. Just but really bad fawning. And B, started policing everyone's language. And once I understood that I wasn't allowed to say anything, that's all I really wanted to talk about. So then 2016, I found some other women online and we joined a Facebook group that was looking at the Olympics and how unfair that was. And then come 2017, I'd really started talking about it a lot online. And then the police contacted me to go for a voluntary interview, in which if I didn't attend, I could be arrested. So it's very voluntary. Wow. About 6 tweets. And then that was my first charge into it. And that year, lots happened. I got defamed by left-wing feminists, call themselves socialist feminists. I just call them socialists. I got defamed by them for being Islamophobic and other accusations. And I also did the billboard.
Okay, then that's fascinating. Yes, tell me about the billboard. So the billboard is the dictionary definition of the word woman. I wanted to do an advert in the Times, actually. I was going to do a whole page. I mean, that's £40,000. I didn't quite have that. Is it? Yeah. Christ.
Yes. Or it might have been a double page spread was 40 grand, but I didn't have that money. But then I found out that a billboard is only £700, just a paper, unlit billboard. And it didn't need to be a lot of money. It just needed to anger the TRAs. Mm-hmm. So that...
Which are TRAs?
Trans rights activists. And I just wanted to anger them. So they would make a fuss. Everybody would say, why are they making a fuss about the dictionary definition of woman? And then we would all go home and have tea and the whole thing would be over. And it would be, what a great idea that was. But instead of that, they took it down. The company Prime Site, which is one of the largest outdoor billboard companies in the world, took it down, saying they should have had a bit of a red alert when it came to the copy. There should have been a red flag when it came to the copy that it wasn't a good thing to put up on a billboard.
Did they specify some sort of regulation that you'd broken?
No. And it didn't go against regulation, because I did then ask the Advertising Standards Committee, because I also got declined by another outdoor company, another, say, 2 or 3 outdoor companies. I was going to have something outside of Waitrose on Kensington High Street. I think they might have gone up for 30 seconds, if at all. But that, again, was the dictionary definition of the word woman. TfL refused, and a bus company, Edinburgh Bus Company, also refused the dictionary definition of the word woman.
Would you be able to steal man, as in make the best possible argument for their position in not wanting that up?
Yeah, because they say that the dictionary definition of the word woman is exclusionary, and is probably causes the mass genocide of men in dresses. I don't know.
I suppose they could say it's they would say dog whistle. You're saying the definition of woman, but there's a dog whistle. I mean, I agree with you. I think if you unpack that, the dog whistle is saying yes, but that's because this is the definition of woman. And I don't believe you're a woman if you're not that.
It is a dog whistle. I guess, it wasn't at the time. I don't even know if I knew what dog whistling was at that time. I'm always a bit late. I still don't know what sea lining is either. But when it came to that, that was the idea, that it generated a conversation, and it certainly did generate a conversation. I mean, it wasn't Women's Hour didn't talk about it. None of the comedy shows. I mean, I think it's quite a funny thing. The whole thing is hysterical. If you're like a comedian, I would have thought that was great material, that you can't even have the dictionary definition of the word woman on a billboard. But we did it in Liverpool when the Labour Party conference was on, also because I was a really disgruntled ex-Labour member. Yeah. So I wanted to provoke them as well. Okay.
You mentioned AGP before. What does that mean?
Autogynephilia. Autogynephile is the person.
Okay. Do you believe that most or all trans people, when whatever, are attracted to it as a fetish?
I think it's an overwhelming majority, so much so that I think it's an exception if somebody is not an autogynephile. And I include sort of even quite young men, not boys, but men. I think it's a driver. I think women often forgive it because we don't really understand the nature of men's sexuality and what a powerful thing it is. Mm-hmm. And I'm a heterosexual woman. I'm really happy about men's sexuality. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
But I'm also acutely aware that actually compulsion and fetish and sexuality all mixed in a bag is not a particularly nice thing, certainly for anybody else around that person who cares about them.
Not when it's mixed with politics as well. There was an article just today, I only read it about 10 minutes before you got here, actually. I just saw Debbie Hayton in the Daily Mail, who I think am I right in saying that they've said, he, she has said that it's attracted to the way others perceive Debbie?
Yeah, I think so. He does talk about being an autogynephile. He also does this thing about saying he's a man, which I think is part of the fetish as well. This sort of humiliation and shame can sometimes be part of the sort of the fetish. It's part of the arousal to sort of think that you're a terrible person and you're persecuted. So, but yes, it's either being attracted to yourself as having a vagina or appearing as a woman, or wanting other people to collude in that delusion and fantasy, which means going out in the street, having fake breasts and calling yourself by a female name, because that then is part of the fantasy in which somebody then says, oh, I'm a man, but I am an AGP and I want other people to find me attractive as a woman, but I'm really not dangerous and I should use women's spaces.
What makes you think that the majority have autogynephilia?
It's a really similar pattern and story to most women you talk about who have these men as their husbands. So it's a bit like coercive control. So it starts with a little thing like, I just want to wear eyeliner around the house. Oh, I just wear nail varnish around the house. That's okay, isn't it? And even though the wives are often uncomfortable, it starts as one thing, and the next minute they're forcing their wives to go out in public with them wearing full women's clothing. They take numerous photographs of themselves in sort of bad underwear, so I just think I've read far too much at this stage to give many men the benefit of the doubt when it comes to their motivation.
I mean, those things could just be, it might just be a mental illness that isn't an auto-arousal thing.
I don't see how that would manifest in then dressing as a woman.
Or if you believed you were a woman, and I'm very much on board with you that you can't be a woman if you're a man. It's absurd. The idea is absurd. But if you believe you are a woman because you have a mental illness, gender dysphoria, whatever it might be, you'd be quite excited to take on that new persona and feel like you're you and to take photos of yourself.
Yeah, but not necessarily in women's underwear and not with an erection. Maybe mental illness isn't about erections after all.
You can't have that if you're going to be and that would then you'd lose the arousal because you'd notice your own.
Oh no. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? That they don't lose their arousal. And I think if you know anything about fetish, which I'm ashamed to say that I do know more than I'd like to about fetish. Like, for example, did you know there's a man that has a fetish about a slurry pit, and he was so angry when the farmer covered the slurry pit that he burnt down the barn and killed cattle. Wow. So it's a really powerful thing. And I think if you don't have a fetish, then it probably just doesn't seem too, I don't know, rational, reasonable, which I guess it isn't, but it's quite an unbelievable thing. If you think about paedophilia as a fetish, which it also is, men literally joined the priesthood for their entire lives just so they could rape children. So I think, and I'm not saying that AGP is, on a par with paedophilia. I'm saying that they're both fetishes. And so the compulsion and the lengths you will go to in order to satisfy your fetish is enormous. And for those of us that don't have fetishes, it's probably quite difficult to imagine.
Fetishes are such a funny thing, aren't they? Because you see someone who's a BBC News presenter, seems all, and suddenly you're looking at Hugh Edwards in his underwear, sending messages to underage people. You wonder all the time what's going on. I mean, it's useless for me to say. I don't really have any. I'm quite a boring person, and it's in 50 years maybe you'll see a picture of me doing something nuts. But I think you're right that it is hard for maybe the majority of us who don't have these things. Do you have an idea about how that kind of fetish might develop in a person?
Only from what I've read. So I know I know a woman actually who went out with a man with a foot fetish, and that had come from a mother ignoring him and the best friend who was very pretty coming round the house when he was a little boy and touching him with her feet. So it can really stick in sort of your formative years. And then that must get confused in adolescence. So often your fetish will start in adolescence, which is when boys start putting on their mum's clothes.
Interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. Does it make a difference to you at all in terms of how you view a trans person if they've had their willy snipped off?
No, not at all. No. Because that fetish again. So, I don't want to talk the whole time about fetish, but
please do.
No. I'm a little bit older than you, so I remember when Channel 4 first started, right? And they had a really smutty program on fetish, and it was like a madam's house. It was a brothel, and this man went in, and his fetish was to have his genitals slammed in between a toilet and a toilet seat. That was what he enjoyed. No sexual activity around that, because he'd gone so past the actual physical sexual element of that and just skipped straight to this. And I think that's another thing we don't understand, is just because they chop their penis off, it doesn't actually mean that their fetish is over, or that that their activity and the way they're sort of presenting themselves isn't still sexual, because it is.
YouTube has stopped showing you guys my videos. Here's some proof. This is how about 8 videos in a row looked. You can see the views, and then suddenly the next few, fewer and fewer, even though many of the other stats are staying the same. This is part of a concerted effort by YouTube to stop certain people speaking out. You can help by making sure you are subscribed, and also when you click subscribe, go to that little alarm button. It makes sure that you are notified when a new video comes up, because it seems like they're not showing you, and it's taking new videos a really long time to start to pick up traction, and then it goes out to people who aren't my subscribers. The percentage of people who watch my videos who are actually subscribers is extremely low. So you can help by clicking subscribe, clicking that like button, and sharing all of my videos if you like the channel.
I love that we're talking about a very serious on the left ideology at the moment, and we have to start sentences with just because they chop their penis off. And that's now where we're at as a society. It's absolutely bonkers. And speaking of that, I watched you on Triggernometry. That got 1.5 million views so far. That's outrageous.
I know, it's great.
They're brilliant. I feel this was now a few years ago. I wonder, do you think they might have changed because Konstantin pushed back against you quite a few times? Do you think, I mean, I suppose you can only speculate unless you've spoken to them recently. Do you think they might have moved and become more on your side?
Well, I've done 3 interviews with them now. Still the most viewed. I think Douglas Murray might have overtaken me since since that damn war. So yeah, I think they definitely have changed. I think a lot of people changed at that interview. I think one thing I've definitely done over the years is I've said the things that are supposed to be unsayable, and I've said them quite plainly and without hesitation and without feeling any sort of shame about it, because I think it's really important that you keep pushing these things into the ether. So I did talk about, I did say they're men. Konstantin he did try to push back, but I also did the same on This Morning after the Billboard. I was on This Morning, and I was also on Sky News, where I just said, I just don't think they're women.
Yeah.
I just don't think these trans women, I think I probably used back there, are women. And it was such a big shift for this conversation, because everybody had started sort of saying, I'm not, and well, in fact, I still hear it, I'm not transphobic, but, or I don't wish any, or I believe in trans rights. And I just think, well, what is that? Like, what are trans rights? So the right for a man to make you call him a woman and come into a woman's only space. Or it's a right for somebody to go to their GP and frighten the hell out of that GP and force that GP to give them medication that they probably know is not going to be life extending. So all of these things, trans rights, as far as I'm concerned, is just a euphemism for demands. Completely irrational, unreasonable demands.
The argument that you've probably heard 100 times is, on an individual case-by-case basis, it is thought that it will make certain people happier to be able to identify as usually a woman, but also a man if they're Ellen Page.
Yeah. Oh, she looks incredibly happy. So Ellen Page is a prime example of why you shouldn't transition. Monroe Bergdorf is also a prime example. He's a man that seems to be now obsessed with cosmetic surgery. He's never going to look like the woman that he wants to see in the mirror. For a start, he's still got a penis and testicles, so that's always going to be
bad start.
So it's going to be tricky. But he can barely move his face. Now, there's some people making a lot of money out of his surgeries, which I think is pretty scandalous. And then he's going to be an advocate, but he's got these veneers and his face doesn't move. And I just don't think, on an individual basis, if we just look at human beings, how can it possibly be right that in order for you to be happier, like mentally happier, which is the only place we're happy, is in our brains, if you start cutting off or altering bits of one's body? Surely, even if I hated my hands, which I have got like granny toddler hands, they're both wrinkly and small.
When I shook your hands, I noticed it was one of the few times in my life that someone had smaller hands than me. And I'm 6'4". I've got these tiny hands, and I was relieved in the handshake. Okay, finally, someone's got smaller hands. A woman has smaller hands than me.
I've got really crazy small hands.
Yeah, they're the female equivalent of mine. Look at that.
Yeah, but I'm not 6 foot, so maybe.
Yeah.
So I can't even remember where we were with the hands thing. I've got really little hands. If I wanted longer hands, if I focused on my hands on a daily basis and said, if only my fingers weren't like a centimetre longer each, I would be happy. And I went to the doctor and said, on a daily basis, I wake up, first thing I do is look at my hands. And no matter how many times I look at my hands, they're not my hands. I'm supposed to have bigger hands. They would just say, how ridiculous. Well, that's utterly ridiculous. You can't have bigger hands. We can't do anything about you having bigger hands. So why would it be that I say, I look at my genitals every day and I don't have a penis, and unless I have a penis I want to kill myself. I just feel surely therapy is where it's at.
I would think so. I suppose the argument against that is, well, hey, people look at their nose over and over again. They don't like their nose. I'll be happier if I get my nose changed, and they get their nose changed and seem to be happier. Breast enlargements and things like that. I don't think they tend to look very good. I lived in Medellin, the plastic surgery capital of the world. They've got bottoms that go out wider than this table for some reason. I don't know what that's about. They seem... Okay, that's mad. Okay, that's not a good example. But the nose job thing, people seem to be happier after nose jobs. So would you be against that?
Yeah, but I guess you don't have a different identity, do you? Really? I guess my hands maybe was a poor example as well. You don't change your nose and then you're a different. You believe that
Despite
you're a
your
different
face.
person. Yeah.
Change your nose despite your face. Yeah, you start to identify as a more attractive person or a more uniformly boring
Yeah,
person.
or if I went to a plastic surgeon and said if I was Jewish or if I wanted to look Jewish, whatever that might be, or I wanted to look Iranian, and I said, I'm a Caucasian woman, I've got a really, really boring lineage of mostly Irish and English, but I really, really want to look Indian, or I want to look something that's got sort of defining features. I don't know that you'd be allowed to do that. I know Ollie London did something like it, but
There was
like,
that woman
that's
as
the
well.
same thing.
Do you remember that woman? There was a woman who identified as
Black.
mixed race or black. Yeah.
Yeah. She also wanted to look like she had small children, didn't she?
Oh,
She had enormous breasts.
okay. Well, she was clearly
well.
insane as well.
Yeah.
But that does make more sense to me because I think race is definitely on a spectrum.
Yes. Well, there's no such thing as race. There's social, there's genetics. So, it depends who your mum and dad are and their mum and dad. It doesn't. There's
I got my
nothing
thing done.
else.
Have you had your thing done?
Yes.
Oh, for the boring Irish.
Yeah, boring. Yeah, I might be a tiny bit something like Turkish, like most people,
Yeah.
thousands of years ago. But no, my husband is in the Doomsday Book. Like his family name is in the Doom.
Wow.
So we've got really boring lineage. Both
Boring,
of us.
but exciting if you were nationalistic.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's
So
something.
in many ways, it's appropriate for me.
I'm 95% Ashkenazi Jewish.
Are you?
Yeah. 5% Iberian.
Nice.
Don't know where that came from. We did have an Iberian milkman. No, we didn't.
Just 5% though, so it's like skimmed.
Yeah, it was just his foot. A lot of people in comments underneath videos you've been in are saying that you've actually been vindicated after all these years. Do you feel that way? And do you feel that people are moving towards what you believe?
I think they are. So I think because I'm just going to be really not modest at all here, because I think I've held the line quite so and really held the line. In fact, I've probably got stronger on holding the line the longer this has gone on. I think it has given space and created opportunity for other people to do the same. Now, there are different groups. Everyone's jostling for kind of who's going to be the most important person in the world when we win this.
Yes.
It's going to be me.
I know.
So there are people that are willing to compromise. So there's a marathon and until I've crossed that finish line, we haven't won. But for some other people, they don't mind giving up sort of 100 yards before the end of the race and do a few compromises. I'm not willing to do that. I absolutely don't think any time ever it is appropriate to give a child puberty blockers at all. So, yeah.
You know what's really complicated in my head here is there are two ways to sort of win an ideological battle, or two philosophies about it. And one is you need to be, I suppose what you're saying, which is move the Overton window, be so strong on it, don't give an inch, because once you start saying she, well then it's harder to say she shouldn't be in the bathroom or that kind of thing. She should be in the bathroom, but not in the women's bathroom. Perhaps people should go to bathrooms, but the other argument is with radicalization, for example, when you're trying to de-radicalize someone, if you sort of get very aggressive and strong about it, they're never going to change their mind. And you have to sort of very gradually go in and say like, hey, I give ground here and so on. So do you see what I'm saying? Are you ever concerned that by being so entrenched, we're not actually going to bring people over?
No, I don't. No, not at all. I think the opposite belief is infantile. And so I think if you had a child, and I think a lot of these TRAs have failed to grow up, I think that's my generation's fault. Often we've been quite permissive parents. We've been do everything for your child parents. And I think because of that, they don't understand the word no because they haven't been told it often enough. So I think then that has to happen. I'm not even that interested in bringing over the radicalized people. I sort of think that they're a very small minority. I'm more interested in bringing the vast majority of people in the middle who don't really understand what's going on and telling them what's going on, so then they shift towards my position, because that's how this will be won. It won't be won by convincing 5% of the population that women don't have penises. It will be convincing the sort of 50% of the population that actually people are genuinely saying that women have penises and they should be in spaces with your daughters and your wives and your mothers and your sisters. So that's my goal. And so everything I've done is always about raising the alarm. It's about telling everybody. It's about shouting from the rooftops in a way that somebody who's not a professional and not an academic can do, in a way that, I mean, Nigel Farage wanted to come out of the European Union and he did it. And he didn't do it by saying to people, why don't we just come out of a little bit? And, you know, maybe we'll stay in on these little treaties. You know, he won that war because the people he was talking to were a vast majority of people who felt not listened to. And I think that's probably very similar to what I'm doing. It's, you know, it's a woman that I talked to in a clothing shop who says that her and her colleagues are fed up with men coming in and trying on their clothes and spending ages in the changing room and making women feel uncomfortable, but worry they'll get the sack if they tell that man he's not allowed in.
I suppose it's just about, if we're imagining Joe and Joanna blogs listening to this now, are they going to respond? And everyone's different, aren't they? Are they going to respond better? Are they want to be seen or perceived to being kind? I'm kind, I'm nice, I'm good. So if they hear something that sounds quite extreme and sounds exclusionary in some sense, they might sort of go, oh no, I don't want to move towards that. If Joe or Joanna Blogs is listening to this now and they're sort of, they're going, I don't know, I'm attracted to a lot of the things that Kellie's saying. What's your sales pitch? Why should we not use pronouns when somebody asks us to use the pronouns which isn't their biological pronoun?
Well, because they're not truthful. And I think a lot of people don't want to do it anyway. And feel forced to do it. So when you use female language for a man, you begin obscuring what it is that he is. And if in a situation I said, oh, actually, Andrew, can I use the bathroom? And then you said, oh, yeah, my friend's in there. She won't be long. Just go on in, right? I'm then going to go into that situation thinking that in there is a woman. Now, you haven't said it's a woman. You've just used the word she. So in my head, I've conjured up all sorts of like unconscious risk assessment that women do all the time. I'm sure men do it as well, but women do it in a different way maybe. And then when I get into that space and it's a man, then that's quite a startling prospect. And I think that's just the very basic of it for most women. These words, these pronouns are really powerful, carry lots of information in a very tiny little word. They're really important. I talk about this man who makes millions by going into companies and changing emails. And one of the things he does in those emails is he changes the email for like we to I and I to we. And just by doing those two things, you have collaborative emails or you have subordinate emails, and it just makes a huge difference. And I think that's what she and he does for women. He is a totally different set of risks and feeling of any situation than the word she. What
are some of those risks then? These are things that I don't have to confront much. What are the risks of men to women?
Well, a man you don't know is far, far more likely to hurt you than a woman you don't know. And I don't think women go around thinking, oh, that man's going to attack me. But I think there comes to certain situations when you're on your own. So my husband and I and children, we'd just flown back from somewhere and we were classy. So we went for a McDonald's breakfast on the way home. And I go in the toilet and I'm in there. And then a man comes in, not speaking English, speaking very loudly on a phone, and comes into the women's toilets and goes into the cubicle next to me. Now, totally involuntary. I'm not then thinking, oh, he's going to attack me. What's he going to do to me? And none of that is conscious. I just do this. And then I breathe really quietly until he's gone out of that room. I'm in a state of high alert. I can't articulate what that is. I know that every single woman I know has experienced that moment where that is a threat and you'd be damned stupid to ignore it. There's a guy called Gavin de Becker, and he's written a book called The Gift of Fear, and he talks about men using nice as a strategy is one of the things he talks about. But he also says, like, the mouse never sort of goes, oh, is it a friendly cat? The mouse has no idea. The mouse has no consciousness or thought process. The mouse is just still frightened, runs. And I think that's how women experience men in places that they shouldn't be. Like, it's not like if I go into Tesco's and there's a man at the checkout, I'm like, oh, don't know what to do with myself. I can't breathe. But if there's a man in somewhere in a space where he shouldn't be, that is a real risk for women. And that's one that we just feel naturally.
Yeah, I guess it's that, you know, even if 99.9 or 99% of men are not dangerous at all, the reason we have rules and regulations is for that 1%, which does exist in a country of 80 million people. That constitutes thousands and thousands of people. So
that's why nice men cross over. So if you're walking home at night and there was a woman in front of you, you are either going to cough, make a noise, and then overtake her, or you might cross the road, or you might back up a little bit, because you as a decent man would understand that she would feel quite concerned about a man walking behind her. Yeah.
I mean, even I feel, and I'm not trying to sort of negate that, I feel concerned when I hear another man on a quiet alley walking behind me somewhere. And so as a woman, I think that concern would be tenfold.
Yeah.
But I'm scared. I say this to my fiance all the time. You know, it not the same level at all. I am comparing, but I'm not equating. It's really scary. And men in the toilets, we have to go in the urinal. I hate it. Hate it. Because these guys, and they come, and I've had that when there's been like a service stop and there's like 20 urinals or urinals in a row, and the guy's just come to the one next to me and he's sort of shaking his willy about and stuff. I've had that, and it's a horrible feeling, and you feel sort of made dirty because it's like he's been there. Go, get out of my space, man. I wouldn't want women in the men's toilets either, though.
No. So I do something called Turf Talk, where people phone in, and a woman said that her husband had gone to a retreat and he didn't realise it was mixed sex toilets. So they just changed, everywhere that's woke has just changed to mixed sex toilets as opposed to single. And he was at a urinal going to the toilet, and I think he's probably in his 50s. And a woman, like just a regular woman, because comes and talks to him in the face whilst he's having a wee.
Oh, I couldn't do that.
No, it's so gross.
I can't. I often will wait for the cubicle to open up because the whole thing is just so awkward. It shouldn't be happening. I don't know what I know it's for space. That's why we have urinals. And I've said this, but changing rooms annoy me as well because there's a certain kind of man, and they don't mean anything by it, but they just purposely flaunt naked and they sort of talk to you, and I'm sitting down and they're right in front of me.
Don't you think they mean something by it? Isn't it a flex of their masculinity that they're so secure in themselves they can basically put their penis in your face? And...
It might be that. I don't want in my life to have that many penises in my face.
No, well, it's a common feeling amongst most people.
I'm done with it. Yeah, well, I think it is. Is there such a thing then as gender dysphoria?
I would say no. I would say no. I think the problem you have with the term gender dysphoria is the word gender. And nobody's decided what that means. Like, somebody might say it's sort of the way you feel and it's based on stereotypes of what a man should be and a woman should be, or you focus on your genitals. And I think actually all it is focusing on something that you feel you might change, and then your life is kind of totally fine. And all of your issues are just in that tiny little box called gender. I think gender should be totally eradicated from our language. I think it's caused no end of harm. I don't think there's any place for it in official documentation. If you ask people to describe it, even people that use it and talk about gender, well, there's sex and gender. Like, no, there isn't. There's sex. And there's a lot of women that use sex and gender, a lot of feminists that use sex and gender as in gender is sort of a role put upon us by society. Well, if that were the case, then it's not innate, is it? It's not an inner feeling, it's imposed. And the other thing is about sex is, of course, my body, I'm 5'1". Of course, that let alone the fact that I'm a woman. The woman bit clearly shapes the way I feel about most things. I am put upon this earth to have babies, like as a species. That's what we're supposed to do. It would be weird if I didn't have more of a caretaking, nurturing kind of nature than my husband, who's not put on this earth to carry an infant for 9 months and then breastfeed that infant to keep it alive.
Yeah.
So there is this weird thing that I think feminists do, and I think that's also lent to their attack on mothers, that pretends that these things are not, we're not born to be mothers. And of course we are. That doesn't mean everyone has to be. And I'm quite happy that not everybody is. Because that would be weird if I wasn't. But I'm quite happy that not all women are mothers. But I think it's ridiculous to think that doesn't shape the way we behave.
I suppose that balance between understanding our history and biology and those kinds of roles and not trying to veer too far from that path, while also granting every human being, woman or man, the same equality of opportunity to do what they want to do.
Yeah. And be honest about it. Because actually, my husband could go back to work when our babies were and I've got 4 children. So when our babies were 2 weeks, he would go back to work. I couldn't do that because otherwise nobody would feed them. And I was actually very lucky to stay home. I didn't think I ever would. I thought it would be dull. But I loved it. And so we can't have the same career paths. We can if we don't have children. And I think it would be ridiculous to say that there would, women don't get promotions who don't have children. But to say that you can take 9 months out, you can actually care for your infant and be happy, because most women do want to stay home. There's many that don't, and good luck to them. But those that do, I think, are now forced by the government to go back to pay somebody else wages, to not gain anything from going to work. I don't know any woman that wants to have a baby and return to work in a job she doesn't love as soon as humanly possible.
The feminist angle that you speak of, there seems to be such an obvious paradox that I feel like I must be missing something, because we're led to believe at the same time that gender is just a social construct. Men and women, as you're saying, that when men and women are exactly the same and can do the same things biologically, exactly the same thing, but then a man wants to identify as the gender of a woman. Well, you've just said it's the same thing. So what are you identifying as if they're the same thing?
Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing, but that's what happens when you have a dogmatic quasi-religious cult, that these things don't actually make any sense. And I think, for me, the reason I'm not a feminist is because feminism made women think that in order to be of value, they had to not have children or not have heterosexual relationships. And there's a lot of feminists that go, no, we believe that children are best raised in a commune. And I'm like, no, my kids need a man and a woman in their life. Fortunately, I'm a heterosexual woman, so I can make that choice. Because my husband has a totally different perspective on the world. And he's also 50% of the world, same as me. But we're supposed to think that our life goal as a woman would be to have what a man has. And I just think to carry a baby in your womb and have that baby and give life to those children is something I wouldn't give up for anything.
Can't you redefine, or not redefine, or just use your own take on what feminism is and say, hey, I am a feminist because for me, feminism is equality of opportunity. And had I not wanted that life that I've chosen, I should be able to have it. For example, the suffragettes and the vote. That's one example. Isn't that your feminism? No.
I'd say that historically, feminist movements have done incredible things. And there's, I probably wouldn't be sitting here opposite you if we hadn't had a feminist movement.
I wouldn't talk to you. I'm only doing so begrudgingly now.
So I think that historically feminism has achieved these incredible things for everybody, not just for women, but for everybody. However, I think at the moment, and maybe there will be a time that we can return back to feminism, but feminism is a bit like all sorts of things where people say, oh, that person's a this thing, and you've got to blame these people. Like feminism, if feminism can be anything and mean anything, then it really doesn't mean anything at all.
I suppose so. I still, if it's sad to me that if you wanted to say, hey, I'm a feminist because, and have your exact beliefs, which don't seem to run counter to an empowerment of women, in my mind, that you're not able to do so because the word feminism has been hijacked by ideologues on the left.
But also what I want to do with my campaigning, which I call women's rights, is I want to reach women that would be put off by the word feminist.
Okay.
So I probably did call myself a feminist for a couple of years, and then a group called Women's Place UK and some of the leading so-called second wave feminists, published author feminists, they started saying she's not a feminist because, or she can't do this, or no feminist would do that. And I was like, all right, then sod you. I'm not a feminist. Fine. Stick it up your arse. I'm not a feminist. I'm quite happy to be a women's rights campaigner. I want to reach, I think only 7% of women in this country call themselves feminists. And I want to reach other women. I want to reach women that are pro-life, deeply religious, super atheist, pro-choice, whatever. I want there to be no barrier at all to any woman coming into this conversation. And I think if I said I was a feminist, I think many women would not come into this conversation.
Interesting. It's amazing how the word feminist has been weaponized in that sense. I mean, the Lord Voldemort of the trans movement is TERF, is a radical feminist. That's amazing to me that the woke or the far left have so quickly gone from championing feminism to that being the very worst possible thing you can be.
Yeah, well, it is. But lots of feminists are supposedly trans inclusive, aren't they? So they would argue that most feminists are on their side.
TERFs, they'd be trans inclusive radical feminist. All those TERFs.
I mean, I call myself I sort of say I'm a TERF, and I don't mind being called anti-trans or transphobe or any of these other things. And I'm called far more than that, as you probably know.
Yes. But oh god, one gets used to it in this game. I get it myself. I mean, there are entire lists on Reddit of me being a transphobe, and I haven't said half the things you have. Not even a quarter. I'm relatively new to this game, but I did the thing that you're not. That really hurts people. I think is when it wasn't the thing you spoke about for quite some time, and then you did, and there's this supposition that you've turned and that you're making more money from it, even though the opposite is true. And if they went back, I've always held these beliefs. It's just it wasn't what I was talking about at the time. I think most people do. Tell me about trans widows. What's a trans widow, and what happens to the children of trans people? So
that would be a woman who is married to what she thought was just a regular heterosexual man, who is then gaslit, suffers coercive control, and this cycle of abuse, humiliation, in which their husband then identifies as a woman. And it's a really mean and devious and abusive situation for those women and those children. Often men who are AGPs come out, and when they can no longer suppress their AGP just to when their wife is out, is when their wives are pregnant or when their daughters start puberty. So those are the two sort of really big flashpoints. That it's quite a common thing that's when they tell their wives that,
why is that?
They like wearing knickers. I think because when a woman is pregnant, that's such a woman thing to do that there is just an obscene amount of jealousy. They just can't keep it in anymore. And when their daughters start developing into women, because they'll talk to their daughters about bra wearing. I mean, I've got a daughter. I remember being a girl going through puberty, and it's really embarrassing. But that's what they do. They talk to their daughters about, oh, I'm wearing this bra, and what sanitary towel or whatever do you use, and should we go and buy some, and should we do shopping? I saw an AGP walk his daughter to school. She was about 13, and I used to take my kids to school driving, and he would hold her hand. And that is him performing the role of a mother, which he didn't do when she probably wanted her hand held when she was 4 or 5 years old going to school. So once he became an out AGP, he would use his daughter as part of this fetish of being a mummy and hold her hand on the way to school. I mean, I have utter contempt for these men.
I wonder if there's another theory about why it would be when the women are pregnant. It's sort of like, you can't leave me now.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a bit of that.
Yeah, now we've got the kids. Now we're in. Now
that's when a lot of abuse starts, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, the man stops acting like Mr. Nice Guy. It's like, I've got you now, we're sorted.
And turns to Mrs. Nice. Yeah.
I suppose
Many
the
ways.
devil's advocate here would be there are also a lot of men who either come to realize or come, whatever, that they are gay in these kinds of marriages. Do you have the same disdain for them?
Anyone that lies, I don't know. Do you really in your 40s suddenly discover you're gay? I think that's...
I'll let you know.
I just don't believe it.
I've got 6 years yet.
But also these men have been cheating as well. So it's not like they discover they're gay and all of a sudden like, oh, I think I have feelings for men. I might need to leave. I've been having sex with men for the last 10 years and now you found out, by the way, I'm gay.
Philip Schofield. And that was a bit of a sneak. He did the Kevin Spacey thing, didn't he? Of coming out and being a hero because he knew it was coming out that he had been not just cheating on his family, but with an underage. Yes, but he denies that underage.
He denies the underage. Yeah, you be careful now.
He denies the underage with the 15-year-old that he met, and
when he was 10.
What was he? We don't know, do we? What age Phillips actually met the kid at?
No, but it was some sort of group, wasn't it? Drama group.
He gave a talk at the school and met the kid there.
I think there's enough men in the world that have had dubious sexual encounters all through their marriages with men that don't tell their wives until they absolutely have to. And suddenly they're like,
yeah,
I'm gay.
What I'd say about Schofield is even if we believe him about the ages, the exact age, and we go, okay, it was 18 or 21. I think he said both those ages when it started to be sexual. You're a man in your 60s, right? You're married, you got kids. It's not on.
No.
And it doesn't have to be illegal, but we're allowed to criticize it.
Yeah.
It's if I'm 34, I'm taken or whatever, but if I was single, I wouldn't be looking at a 20-year-old,
no.
19 or 18-year-old.
Do you think it would have been different if that had been a girl that he'd met when she was about 15 and then 18?
A lot of people think that it was a homophobic attack on him and Hugh Edwards.
But do you think he would have been more condemned by society had it been a girl?
I think it depends on the different sections of society.
Well, homophobes are always just not going to like whatever he's done.
So
but I just think that it was a get out of jail free card, wasn't it? Had it been a girl that he'd met when she was at school, and then when she was a runner and she was 18, he's in his 60s, he wouldn't have been able to use the gay get out of jail free card.
With Hugh Edwards, we don't know the gender of or the sex of the.
We do though, don't we?
Underage,
don't we?
I think it was reported a lot as a boy, and then people were like, actually, we don't know this.
I think the fact that it wasn't a girl makes me think it was a boy. There was something where there was an omission. I'm just like, that was an interesting omission.
Why did they do that? They can keep the person anonymous. They usually say the sex of the victim.
I don't know. It depends who broke it as well. I have no idea. There's my answer.
Do you worry about, speaking of school, school age and what can happen, what adults can be doing and how they're influencing children? Do you worry about your kids at school, all of our kids at school, and this ideology? I
do. So I went into, my children have since left the school, but I went into school because I looked at their PSHE.
What's that?
Something in social health education, personal and social health education. So I went in and I said to the teacher, do you know what I do? She said, yes. And I said, good, because then that'll make this a lot more easy. Can you tell me what these terms mean? I went through a couple of like gender identity. Well, that's why we're getting people in. I was like, who are you getting in? And they said, gendered intelligence. And I just said,
they must hate you as school.
So I just said,
she is again, Kelly's back.
I was like, I don't think you will. And she said, and I think she was waiting, and I'm quite good at this. And she said, because they're the experts. And I went, oh no, you won't be doing that. You won't do that.
Sounds quite threatening. They hate you. Oh, I bet you go in and. Well,
I'm very calm. I'm not aggressive. I mean, you mentioned earlier about if you're aggressive. I'm never aggressive. I'm really forthright. I'm very firm in my opinions. I'm not going to be persuaded otherwise. But I'm really not aggressive, and I've got far less aggressive as time's gone on. I'm quite good at just letting people just say the things that they don't really want to say. And then they come to their own realization that they're talking absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like in my son's new school, I've written and said, I've racked my brains. I don't know why you've got a whole flag display in one of the classrooms. So it was quite recent. So I'm going to go and have a meeting.
But did this cause your children embarrassment?
No.
Are they on board with you?
I think a lot of children feel really coerced and manipulated by this. I think they feel that they can't speak at school, that there's loads of stuff like a bit eye-rolly. Like, I think for boys, it's a lot easier to deal with than girls. But being ostracized from your friendship group because there's competitive niceness amongst girls, not being able to speak up, even if there was a boy in your changing room, a lot of the girls would be doing that. I don't mind because she's fine, she's so great. And if you're the girl that does mind and feel awful, like happened in New Zealand in like 2016, a girl got suspended or expelled from a school because she would use a single changing room because a boy was now in the girls' changing rooms. And he thought it was like a sleepover in the movie Grease. So he'd be doing like hitting people with towels or pulling bra straps and just doing how he imagined girls to behave, which they don't. And she felt uncomfortable. She went in the changing room, single stall. And because of that, she got expelled because he felt uncomfortable because she was being transphobic. So I think children want adults to be adults. I don't know if you know this, but I went into a school and recorded a conversation at primary school. So I went in as an advocate to sit with a woman who was quite nervous about going, but just wanted someone there. And the teachers barefaced lied. This is a primary school.
What kind of thing?
So there was a book read about a crayon. I can't remember the ins and outs of the crayon. So it might be that it's a red crayon, but it's got a blue wrapper. And the red crayon the blue crayon, because it's got a blue wrapper, wants to like do ballet, or it's the other way. So basically the red crayon is a girl and the blue crayon's a boy. That's the premise of the story. And the woman said, yeah, but I asked you repeatedly, their mother said, I asked you to, safeguarding leads, that if anything was going to go on about gender identity in my daughter's class, I wanted a heads up because we're a gender critical family. Her words, not mine. It wasn't anything to do with gender identity. I know some schools use it as that, but it wasn't anything to do with gender. It's just about difference. And
that's what they said.
So, yeah. And some children do this and some children do that. And they just were really careful not to use stereotypically boy-girl stuff. And then they said, because it might be that some children want to play football, and that's what we talked about. Some children want to play football, and maybe they don't want to play football, but all the other children want to play. And I said, you're talking about boys and girls. Yeah. I was like, you're literally talking about boys and girls.
But if that is just, we want girls to know they can grow up and be mathematicians and footballers and things, that's if it is that and therefore you're in the wrong body and need to cut off your nipples, then surely that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what it used to be, wasn't it?
Right.
It's like girls can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
There's no glass ceiling. Girls could be whatever they want. Like, let's smash the glass ceiling. Whereas now we're like, oh, let's put some different dressing. Let's just change the curtains. Let's keep that glass ceiling right there. And if you want to break through it, you have to pretend to be a boy.
Is the concern social contagion that leads in children that might lead to at best confusion and at worst changing your body?
Yeah, of course. It's so broad. So like back in that conversation, basically the school would allow a boy to sleep on a residential trip, a boy to sleep in a girl's bedroom without necessarily telling the parents. And when I said, look, would you? The teacher said, well, we'd have to have a conversation about that. I was like, why isn't it no?
Yeah.
How is it not just no? And then also in that conversation, if this woman's daughters who were like 7 and 9 had said he for a boy, they would be reprimanded as if it was bullying. And they would face punishments if they didn't then call the boy a girl. So in that situation, like the kid that's being coerced, manipulated, groomed by the school and other children and their parents into believing that they're the opposite sex, there's all the children around who haven't got demented parents, who want to be able to speak, who can see with their very own eyes that is a boy or that is a girl, and they're being told by everyone, including adults that they trust, that they should say something that they know to be untrue and that the adults around them are lying. So then what we're doing to a whole school, if you've got one trans kid in a school, the whole school is then subjected to a big fat lie in which how can any child feel secure and stable and steady on a foundation of truth? Because there isn't one. And then for that individual child, you've got grooming parents who have also been groomed. Sometimes it's just a Munchausen demented mother who can't be bothered to make anything of herself, so she's then the best mother in the world because she's so accepting that her little girl is now a boy. You've got teachers going along with it. And because they're going along with it, and because there's this weird thing happening now in schools, that schools know better than parents, and that schools are being encouraged to think that they can do things with people's children without the parents' consent. Like they're not loco parentis anymore. They're instead of.
Yeah, which has always been the sign of a horrible dictatorship or ideology when when schools start to go too far. And
they might as well have little Red Army uniforms.
Yeah, I know.
It's very frightening.
It feels to me then often that there seem to be two classes of people, and this is actually a spectrum, but there's two classes of people, and there's those who expect society to change for them and around them, and those who understand that they can't have everything that they want. And I feel like, for example, I'm tall, and I'm 6'4", and I know that when I'm at a concert, I feel ashamed and I'm in the way. These are things that short people like you don't even realize. You don't know the stuff we go through, probably don't even think about, but I'm constantly hunching, going, oh gosh. And what I do is I move to the side, or I go sorry to the people behind me. I don't start, and there are loads of things that are not made for people my height. I know there are a lot of things not made for women as well, and to an extent, those things need to be changed when it's, Anyway, I'm babbling, but I don't expect everything to change for me. Now, if I wanted to go around and represent as a woman, the idea that I would then go into the swimming competition and win by about 50 laps, as Leah Thomas did, and not have shame, this is a psychopath.
Yeah.
I think that Leah Thomas must be either a psychopath or something's just
I've seen him in the flesh.
Oh.
So I went over to the NCAA when he raced against Riley Gaines.
Right.
And I shouted, and it can be heard by everybody in the swimming, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
They call it
the swimming auditorium.
Yeah.
What does one call it?
They call it something else. Like it's something weird, but very American, a bit sort of like colorization instead of color. It's a bit like that.
The swimmerization tournaments.
Let's call it that. Aquatic
games.
So I went in that place and everybody could see that he was a man. So I shouted, he's a man.
Yes.
That could be heard by, it was a real like, he's naked. It was very much that kind of, he's a man. And then I also had a chat with someone where they said, are you a biologist? And I said, well, I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is. And that sort of went really super viral.
Were you nervous before shouting he's a man?
It just had to be done.
But did you feel a little bit, I'm going to shout this out in a big swimmerization?
I don't think I did feel nervous. I think I was getting quite impatient.
Okay.
It'd been a bit of a trying day. I was with a really insane American woman.
Yeah.
Which I won't go into because it's really insane. And everybody was, and he was there and he just won, and his shoulders are so big. And I was having to stay in the same hotel as him in Atlanta. So he'd already been seen. He's like, I don't know if he's 6'4", then he hides it well. He looks like 6'6".
Wow.
He's like massive. And so, especially against all the women. And so I did just shout, he's a man. But there's a Canadian, isn't there? 50-year-old Canadian swimming with 13-year-old girls. And the mums and dads are watching.
Does he identify as a child?
Yes.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does.
Shut up.
Yes, he does.
I think I saw this actually.
Yeah.
What he identifies as, is it just useful idiots? Is the world full of useful idiots?
Perverts always. There's always been flashers and perverts and nonces and all the other lovely terms.
All the words
for them.
that'll get my YouTube taken down. Thank you.
Sorry. There's always been really devious, terrible people that want to commit heinous acts against other people. What we didn't used to do is we didn't used to have schools selling the ideas. We didn't used to have people turning a blind eye. I recently did a video about pie in the 1980s and how these two, and we think children are sexually mature and we think they can make decisions. And it was all, it's very familiar to this, which is...
Pie?
Oh, file information
Oh
exchange.
God, not the word again.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I call them PDF files on this, but it doesn't work with Americans because of the different pronunciation of it.
File.
Yeah,
They're people with a.
Take all of that out.
Jordan Peterson had to cut the interview to like 30 minutes
Really?
to put it. Yeah, he was so worried his channel would get taken.
You don't have to overdo it. We just cut the actual P word and like an R word here and there. It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, there's always been these men, and why we wouldn't think that they would rebrand to try and do this. And then you've got teachers who, some of which have never been out of school. So they've gone to school, college, uni, school. And I think they then lose a perspective about what an adult is and what a child is. And just because they're teenagers sound grown up, that's just because the rest of the day they're dealing with 11-year-olds. That's not because in comparison to an adult, those teenagers are genuinely grown up.
Yeah.
And the push for, so what these paedophiles, it's quite scary, but what the men with an unhealthy interest in children were saying in the Pie interview with the BBC is that children need educating about sex and sexuality. So children need to be educated about sex. Isn't that what we're doing? Like, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing with primary school children, talking about sexuality all the time. Yeah.
Things like that. Not that you can change your gender, though.
And they're saying that the reason you do that is it helps children identify things when they're being abused. Well, I don't think not being able to say the word penis or gay, I don't think those things are the barrier between somebody saying that they're being subjected to sexual abuse or not. I think that's absolute nonsense. And I think parents have always talked about private and, don't let people touch you and consent. I think we talk about that all the time, and children learn that through osmosis as well. I don't think the school should be talking about that at all.
No, I don't think it's not relevant. And the social contagion aspect is just we don't know enough about it. It is too concerning. Academics are always dangerous. There's that kind of, when you're too intelligent in one particular domain, you think you don't have blind spots in others, and they start applying their knowledge in one domain to others, and it doesn't work. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we've had this so many times over the years, and this was Foucault, wasn't it? All the Foucault and all these French philosophers about, what children should be getting up to, and
just leave them alone.
Leave the kids alone, as long as they know, wear a prophylactic. That's it. Where can I've got another question for you in a minute, but where can we send people who are watching?
To letwomenspeak.org or my new political party that's going to be registered hopefully soon. It's taken 10 months. And that's at partyofwomen.org, or I'm on YouTube as Kellie-Jay Keen, or Twitter as Posie Parker.
Okay. Who's a heretic you admire?
Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, he's mine.
I love him so much.
There's that, because I was talking about this before. There's this amazing extract that I put up on Twitter, because I'm rereading Hitch 22, where he said something about the old left. And he said, we fought for our rights. It would never have done to say, I'm a member of this sex, gender, whatever it is, therefore I'm a victim and I can speak on it. And it was just so beautifully written. And it was before a lot of this kicked off. And he was just right. What does he mean to you?
Oh, he gave me, I don't know, he inspires me. I think that I could listen to him all night long. One of my favorite things to listen to is him and his brother argue about God.
Amazing.
I love it. I really admire Peter as well. I like the way he speaks, but just the whole religion thing. So I did call myself an anti-theist for quite some time. I'm a little less now. And I actually think that there is a human compulsion that requires religion or something, some collective belief, in order for us not to go crazy and narcissistic and nuts. But I am an atheist. I'm a gold star atheist. I've never believed in God. I've never had any religion. There's no place I can find it. But just when he would just cut to it, and I think I probably have some of that technique, that I'd rather just say, absolutely not, no, that doesn't happen, than, oh, do you think so? I don't want to have, although I probably have not proven my point here, but I don't want to have a 3-paragraph kind of monologue about something that says, no, that's a man.
Okay.
Like, but no, it's a man. And it doesn't matter why he's a man or how he's a man. He's just not coming in the women's spaces.
What brain rot. You see what brain rot takes over these people? Utter brain rot. I shouldn't be in these gardens. That's my favourite Hitchens from when he's talking about Diana. Someone says, you're denigrating Diana in her own image. You shouldn't be in these gardens. Brain rot. What brain rot? Love that. People, go follow Kellie's channel. It's going to be in the thing. We'll have the Posie Parker Twitter. We're going to have all the links all down below. Please do support her because she's just wonderful. And keep watching this channel. There's a thing that's similar. Maybe Helen Joyce. It might be something different, and you know, but it'll be a similar thing. And click on the thing.